Good morning, 7th grade. We'll say good morning. It's actually like Thursday afternoon when I'm making this video for Monday morning. Not at all confusing. Just roll with it. Bunch of stuff I want to cram into this one video, so really important you kind of roll with me here. Like I said, it's Thursday when I'm making this video. So I want to go back over Tuesday and Wednesday lessons that you turned in, Bible lessons from the life of Christ. Just two, like one question from each one. On 29, that's a grand entrance into Jerusalem. Why did Jesus weep over Jerusalem? I took a lot of stuff. But what I was going for is the fact that Jesus knew that Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. That the Roman Empire was going to come in. Well, the Roman Empire had taken over, but that it was going to be destroyed. There's going to be a Jewish revolt. Rome was going to respond by destroying the temple. Lesson 30, disruption at the temple. Why did the children respond to Jesus this way? Basically, I wanted to point out that if you remember, we talked about before that the children came to worship Jesus, and that the disciples tried to send them away, and Jesus said, no, let the little children come to me, and that we should worship like little children, be completely trusting and completely without a lot of the baggage and stuff that adults have. And so here you see that. You see these kids are just totally trusting Jesus. They get it. Jesus is a great guy. They don't have any of the political stuff going on like the grown-ups do. They're just like, hey, there's a guy who's doing some really cool stuff, and he likes us, and he's not shoving us out of the way. We're going to go to him and praise him. Whereas the grown-ups are like, oh, if we start worshiping Jesus, then we're going to have religious leaders and political leaders get mad at us, and they're worried about all this extra stuff that little kids are able to just ignore and be like, hey, there's a good guy. I like him. I'm going to go hang with him. And that's what Jesus wants. He wants us to just kind of put aside some of that extra stuff that we like to add to religion and instead just have that relationship with him. What does this lesson tell us about Jesus' priorities for his people? He loves his people. He cares about his people. He wants what's best for his people. Yeah, I've been outside for recess, got the recess here going. So that's those two lessons. I don't remember if there's anything before we went into quarantine that I really wanted to point out. I'm guessing there isn't. No, don't think there's really anything that I wanted to point out from before we went into whole quarantine thing. All right. So memory verse this week is going to be totally different than any memory verse we have done before. But I think it's one that's really cool. We're getting ready to this week start talking about the actual crucifixion. Today we're going to talk about, well, I'll tell you in a minute, but starting tomorrow, Tuesday, we're going to start talking about Jesus' actual crucifixion, his time on the cross. And while he was on the cross, he had a grand total of 7 different things that he said. 7 things in hours of torture on the cross. And I had this really nice bookmark that has the 7 things that Jesus said. The last 7 words. It's not actually 7 words, it's 7 sentences. But anyway, you get the point. All right. Be prepared to be flipped and moved. So, what you're going to do for your memory verse is you're going to memorize some of the last 7 things he said. I tell you, you have to know it is finished is in John 19:30. You have to be able to know, my God, why have you forsaken me? Matthew 27:46. And you have to be able to say, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Luke 23:34. If you write those 3 with the correct scripture reference, you get full credit. And this memory verse will be worth more than just 25 points. Probably 30 points. 20 points. It's usually worth 20 points. So I'm still saying probably 30. But then if you write either 4, 5, 6, or 7, or all 3 of them correctly with the correct scripture reference, you get extra credit. So you can't just put I thirst and get all the full extra credit. You got to put I thirst John 19:28 to get the full credit. As of right now keep in mind, it's Thursday. A whole lot can change. But as of right now, Mr. Hess is saying that we might be coming back on Thursday. So That means we'll be here on Friday to do memory verse in person. So I'm going with the assumption we're going to be here Friday to do memory verse in person. So that means Friday, when it's time to do the memory verse quiz, you'll get your lined piece of paper and you will write, "It is finished," John 19:30. My God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27:46. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing," Luke 23:34. You write that, nothing else, hand it in, you get full credit. If you also write, "Today you will be in paradise with me," Luke 23:43, you get some extra credit. If you write, "Dear woman, behold your son," and to the disciple, "Behold your mother," John 19:26-27, some more extra credit. "I thirst," John 19:28, more extra credit. "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit," Luke 23:46, more extra credit. The more you write, the more extra credit you get. Back to me. And we'll go over that every day. I make a video and then go over it again when we are in person. And I will attach that to LMS. Okay, so we have in our videos, in our discussion, just ended on Friday, with Jesus having been arrested and the disciples scattered. Now we get to the part of the story of the last week of Jesus's life. We're right now time-wise Thursday night, Friday morning. And this is the part where we play the giant game of pass the buck. Jesus is now a problem. And he's going to become a problem for a lot of people. And so they're going to play the game of just pass him along from person to person to person to try to figure out what to do with him. So Jesus has been arrested. Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish official, I'm now reading in John 18:12. So the soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him and brought him first to Annas, who was father-in-law to Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Now, we got to get a little history lesson here going, looking at my Bible cheat notes. This was a preliminary... Let me start over again. This was a preliminary investigation done in preparation for Jesus being interrogated by Caiaphas. At one time, Annas had been the high priest, but the Romans deposed him or kicked him off the high priest chair, whatever. So Annas is no longer high priest because Rome said that he was no longer high priest. But that doesn't mean that the Jewish people didn't kind of still recognize him. So they're going to go to Annas first, because even though he's not the high priest because Rome kicked him off. Not because the Jews didn't kind of sort of still recognize him. So after the Romans got rid of Annas as the high priest, he retained the power behind the office. He just didn't actually have the office because he wasn't allowed to, according to the Romans. First, his son took his place as high priest. Then his son-in-law, Caiaphas, took his place as high priest. And then there was more people that came after him. But so Annas is the unofficial high priest who's recognized, listened to by the Jews. Caiaphas, the son-in-law, is the real high priest as far as the Romans are concerned and as far as on paper, I guess you would say, he's the one that's in charge. Caiaphas, history tells us that Caiaphas is wealthy, ambitious, and crafty. He was seen by the Jews as the authority alongside his son-in-law. So those two kind of shared the position, but Caiaphas is the official one. So they take him to Annas first. Caiaphas is the dude who earlier in the scriptures said it would be a good idea if Jesus died. That it would be better for Jesus to die than for the whole nation to get in trouble, to lose their position. So then after Annas, he gets taken to Caiaphas. As I said, this is a huge game of let's pass the buck. Matthew and Mark both tell basically the same thing. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. Now, this is a picture I've shown you before. This is the council, the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is made up of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the elders. So it would have been, and it tells you down here, I know it says it on here. Council, Sanhedrin, in a sense, the Jewish Supreme Court, made up of the chief priests, elders, and scribes. It's normally 71 members. The Pharisees were the scribes, the teachers of the law. The Sadducees were the chief, the high priest. So Caiaphas would have been the high priest, which means he would have been a Sadducee, and part of this Sanhedrin. So that's who Jesus is now being brought in front of, is the Sanhedrin. But Peter followed him at a distance. Remember, all of the disciples scattered is what the Bible tells us. Now, we don't know whether that means that John and Peter came back or whether it just means that most of them scattered except for Peter and John. In John, it tells us that Peter was able to get into the courtyard of Caiaphas's house, not the actual house, because of John. John apparently had some connections. But Peter followed him a distance right up to the courtyard of the high priest. He entered and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they didn't find any, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 came forward and declared, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." Now remember, when Jesus said that, he was talking about his body. But of course, they're not going to take it that way. Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, "I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." "Yes, it is as you say," Jesus replied. "But I say to all of you, in the future you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Now that's just really going to send them off, because remember, part of the Sanhedrin is the Sadducees, who don't believe in resurrection or any of that. So this mention of heaven is really going to upset these people, number one. Number two, he's basically quoting from Daniel, because in Daniel, I had it written down somewhere, the exact place, Daniel 7:13, in my vision. So this is a vision that Daniel had. "I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power over all peoples, nations, and men of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting one that will not pass away." And they would have realized, I mean, these are the guys whose job, whose life is to study scriptures. So when Jesus said that, basically quoting from Daniel, they're like, he really just said that. He really just said that he is that guy that was prophesied about, whose kingdom's going to last forever, the Messiah, the Savior, that was prophesied about in Daniel. Oh yeah, that really sent them over the edge. So then the high priest tore his clothes. Well, now, first of all, tearing clothes was a way of showing emotion back then. But the high priests were not supposed to tear their clothes. So basically, it's like an adult temper tantrum here that they're throwing. Tearing their clothes and said, "He has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" "He is worthy of death," they answered. Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fist. Others slapped him and said, "Prophesy it to us. Who hit you?" The other thing is this whole thing is being done in a way it shouldn't have been done. They're bringing false witnesses, which is against their own laws, and they're doing it in the dead of night, which is against their own laws. The irony there is not lost, to say the least. Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl said to him, "You also are with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it before them all. "I don't know what you're talking about." Then he went out to the gateway, where another girl saw him, and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again with an oath, "I don't know the man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them, for your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses on himself, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken. "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." And we went outside and wept bitterly. I have so many places marked in my Bible here. Back to John. I don't know if there's anything else from John that I want to put in here. Wanted to say. There is, but I can't find it, so I'm not going to worry about it. So then Jesus goes before Pilate. Then Matthew 27 talks about Judas hanging himself. Matthew 27, meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor. So then they take him to Pilate. Now, the interesting thing about this is, I'm now in John. Then the Jews led Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, the Jews did not enter. According to Jewish custom, if a Jew entered the house of a Gentile, the Jew was considered unclean and would have to go through all this purification stuff so that they would be clean and would be allowed to participate in any Jewish holidays like Passover. So they're not going to do anything to make themselves unclean, like actually go into Pilate's palace. The hypocrisy of everything they're doing cannot be lost here. They're having a trial, which is actually a sham of a trial, to accuse Jesus. They are doing it at night when it's illegal. Then they turn around, but they're going to be sure to follow the laws of not going into a Gentile's house, but yet they have no problem of falsely accusing Jesus. Yeah, we're just going to pick which rules we're going to go by. So Pilate comes to them and says, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," the Jews objected. This happened so that the words Jesus had spoken, indicating the kind of death he was going to die, would be fulfilled. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it that you have done?" So Pilate's really lost here. He's like, they've got this guy, they're bringing him to me, they wanted me to kill him. Because according to Jewish law, they can't kill according to Roman law, they can't kill Jesus. But he can't figure out what the guy did wrong. So he keeps going back and forth to Jesus, trying to figure out why Jesus is there, what Jesus has done, going to the Jews, like, would you really want me to kill this guy? Is there really any reason why I should kill this guy? And he's feeling very trapped. Because if the Jews decide to revolt, then Pilate's going to get in all kinds of trouble with the Romans. But he realizes Jesus is a special guy and that there's something about Jesus. So he's going, should I be more scared of Jesus or should I be more scared of the Jewish people and the Romans? And he's saying throughout this conversation that he's got all this power. He's got zero power, but he doesn't realize it. And the interesting thing is throughout Jesus's arrest and throughout his fake mess of a trial, throughout this whole conversation with Pilate, he's the one that's ultimately in authority. It's very clear through all of this that he's answering the questions truthfully, but he's answering the questions knowing that ultimately he is going to die. And he's not doing anything to change that. He's not trying to get out of it. He's not calling down angels. He knows this is what he's supposed to do. And so he's just going to go with what he's supposed to do. So anyway, Pilate's like, "What have you done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You are right in saying I'm a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this reason I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. Okay, he's talking to Jesus, who earlier said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." That's kind of an interesting question to ask. "I find no basis for a charge against you, but it's your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of Passover. Do you want me to release Jesus or Barabbas, who is a notorious criminal, who has started an insurrection, a riot before, and who is also a known murderer?" But the Jews are like, "No, crucify Jesus. We want him killed, crucify him." And so I'll let you read the rest of John 18 and 19 through about the conversation between Pilate and Jesus. Matthew 27 adds one more thing about this conversation. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." And so he asked, "Who do you want me to release?" The people are like, "Release Barabbas. We want to crucify Jesus." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." When Pilate saw they was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd and said, "I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility." All the people answered, "Let his blood be on us and on our children." They released Barabbas over to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Luke 23 adds one more detail. As I said, this is a giant game of let's pass the buck. Luke includes the fact that Pilate asked him the same questions. Let's see here. Let's see. Verse 5, they insist that they want Jesus killed. They say he stirs up people all over Judea. He started in Galilee. Verse 6, 23, verse 6. On hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. When he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, remember Herod is the king at the time, he sent him to Herod, who happened to be in Jerusalem, to celebrate Passover because Herod's wife was a Jew. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased, because for a long time he had been wanting to see him. From what he had heard about him, he hoped to see him perform some miracle. In other words, he's like, yes, I get to see Jesus perform a magic show for me. He plied him with many questions, but Jesus gave him no answer. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there, accusing him. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. Dressing him in an elegant robe, they sent him back to Pilate. That day, Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they had been enemies. And so then we go back to the same thing, that he is now sent to be flogged and crucified. So basically a giant game of let's pass the buck. Herod doesn't want to crucify him because he realizes he's not guilty of anything. Pilate doesn't really want to because he realizes that Jesus is innocent. But he's more scared of the Jews in the long run than he is of the authority that Jesus has. So tomorrow we'll pick up from there. Remember, we'll be studying those memory verses, the last 7 words, which I'll attach to LMS. And as far as I know, we will have a memory verse quiz in person on Friday. Remember, you'll have a lesson in Life of Christ to do. And remember, you'll need to write a paragraph on this video. Not on the lesson in Life of Christ, but on this video. The lessons from here forward in Life of Christ may not perfectly match up with what I'm doing in the videos, but we're trying to get them all done by spring break. So that's just kind of the way that ended up happening. See you tomorrow.